Welcome to the Alaska Weather Show. I'm meteorologist Peter Chan, coming to you from the National Weather Service on this Saturday, May 13th, 2023. We have a lot going on across the state of Alaska this weekend. River breakup season is underway. The snowmelt accelerating with warmer temperatures, especially spreading in through the east central interior, and this is leading to ice jam flooding. I'll highlight the trouble spots coming up here in just a moment. High wind warnings remain in effect along areas of the west central coast, especially the western Seward Peninsula down into the lower Yukon Delta through tonight, early Sunday morning. Some of those winds are going to be spreading inland, especially across the Alaska Range as we go into Sunday and early Monday. Red flag warnings for critical fire weather conditions have been issued for the central Alaska Range around and north of Isabel Pass, up in through that section of the Tanana River Valley on the north side of the Alaska Range. And a warm ridge of high pressure will continue to build up from southwest Canada into the Panhandle early and middle part of next week. 60s and 70s, even the possibility of maybe an isolated 80-degree reading in the southeast corner of the state at Hyder. So definitely much warmer temperatures down there. But here in areas of the east central interior, we've seen warmer temperatures. A couple afternoons ago, it was 68 degrees at Eagle, 55 this afternoon, partly sunny, but you can see the water and ice there along the road associated with the Yukon River. And we do have ice jam flooding occurring in that area. Down as we go into the Kuskokwim River Basin, downstream of Sleet Mute, we do have an ice jam warning for Red Devil. But right now, there in that region, mostly sunny, temperatures getting up into the mid-50s, some of the warmest temperatures that we've seen so far this spring. And from a couple days ago, two of our River Forecast Center hydrologists were up there in Eagle. This is what it looked like at Front and Lincoln Street, and then that's what it looked like this earlier Saturday morning on May 13th. The ice jam being pushed up on to the shoreline there, damaging that particular sign. And there's a broad area of ice that's flowing down the Yukon that will be heading down towards Circle. So that'd be the next area that could be impacted by this long ice jam that is working its way down the Yukon River. As a result, we have in orange are all areas under flood watches for the potential of snowmelt and ice jam flooding. That includes the upper Yukon River as well as the Tanana River. And especially we're keeping an eye on places like Circle and Manly Hot Springs. We also have flood watches in effect for the upper half of the Kuskokwim River from especially Aniak on up through Sleet Mute. We do have flood warnings. I'll highlight those in just a moment. And then we have the high wind warnings here in the west, including western Seward Peninsula and down through the lower Yukon Delta. Wind advisories that'll spread inland as that front pushes inland. Some gusty winds around areas such as Grayling, Anvik, Holy Cross, and Russian Mission, and also areas of the Alaska Range. We do anticipate some strong gusty winds. As a result, red flag warnings for critical fire weather conditions along and just north of the Alaska Range, especially there north of Isabel Pass, Donnelly Dome. These areas here under the gun both Sunday afternoon and Sunday evening, and again Monday afternoon and Monday evening. And the areas that are highlighted in this lighter blue indicate increased snowmelt, higher water levels on area rivers and creeks. Also down through here, you could be picking up some gusty winds and another half to 1 inch of rainfall extending down areas there of the Alaska Peninsula. So here are the current flood watches that encompass the upper half of the Yukon River, the Tanana River Basin, as well as the upper half or 2/3 there of the Kuskokwim River Basin. Those of you in the lower Yukon, lower Kuskokwim, pay attention, because with the milder temperatures this week and the water that's coming downstream, it will eventually break up the rivers and impact you in the days ahead. And we do have flood warning for ice jams at Eagle and flood warning for ice jams at Red Devil, and then a flood advisory in the upper Copper River Basin at Moose Creek at Gulkana because of snowmelt, and that will also be increasing here with the warmer temperatures. Best thing to do, though, is be proactive, move and safeguard property before high water and ice breaks develop. Have extra food, batteries, and medical supplies ready. Know your community safety plan and where the emergency shelter locations are, and then stay out of the floodwaters and ice flows once they develop. Quick check of the fire danger. Some areas of very high fire danger, but it's this area along and just north of the Alaska Range in the Tanana Valley that is under that red flag warning for Sunday afternoon and evening and Monday afternoon and evening. Quick check of the satellite imagery. We do have a few lingering scattered showers in the Panhandle, but the main action is with this front here pushing into the west coast. We have snow further north in the Chukchi Sea with rain and a mix of precipitation going to all rain here across the eastern Aleutians into the Alaska Peninsula. High pressure is going to be building from southwest Canada back into the southeast interior, warming temperatures in the week ahead. As we go through tonight, early on Sunday morning, low pressure from the northern Bering extending northeastward up into the Chukchi Sea. Secondary low will be developing here along the eastern Aleutians and tip of the Alaska Peninsula. This front, occluded front, kind of washes out as it pushes inland. It's butting up against this very strong mid and upper level ridge of high pressure. That's what's going to allow the Panhandle to dry out and really warm up here early and middle part of next week. Kind of the frontal battleground will be here along the west side of the state, where the weather will just not be as nice. We're anticipating more in the way of cloud cover, some cooler temperatures, and some precipitation that will just continue on and off. But areas that do get sunshine here, especially across the eastern interior along the Alcan border and in through the Panhandle, we'll see temperatures in the 60s, even some 70s, and it can't rule out an isolated 80-degree reading, maybe down in the far southern Panhandle as we get into midweek. Now, temperatures for this Sunday morning will generally be above freezing most areas, except for pockets there in the Copper River Basin and along and north of the Brooks Range up along the Arctic coast. Look at this, could hit 71 at Fort Yukon Sunday afternoon, 60s Fairbanks, 60s returning to the Panhandle. Cooler readings still, though, in the 30s along the Arctic coast and the west side of the state. As we go into Monday morning, again, low temperatures generally in the 40s, above freezing here into south central, a little cooler, 30s elsewhere, but you got to get up along and north of the spine of the Brooks Range into the Arctic coast and then western Seward Peninsula, get temperatures back below freezing. We do anticipate some isolated 70-degree readings across the east central interior, and then also beginning to develop there Monday as we go through the day, and even warmer temperatures possible Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. So the extended temperature forecast May 19th through the 29th, temperatures are going to tend to be cooler than normal across the southwestern half of the mainland back into the Alaska Peninsula, but continue above normal across the Panhandle. And that's all just because of this prevailing pattern that's been tough to break down. That's only going to tend to fuel the snowmelt runoff and accelerate the river breakup in the week ahead and continuing into the following week. Precipitation may average a bit above normal, most likely over the southeast interior, Wrangell, St. Elias Mountains into the northeastern Gulf Coast and northern portions of the Panhandle, while we expect near normal precipitation along the southwest and extending out into the Alaska Peninsula and eastern Aleutians. So overall, though, we are going to see temperatures continue to gradually warm.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Let's go ahead and take a look at your aviation weather. And as we go through Sunday and Monday, we still have the system in the west. Low pressure this Saturday afternoon. It's in the northern Bering. Will extend and develop northeastward across the Chukchi Sea up into the Arctic Ocean as we go through Sunday and early Monday. Secondary low south of the eastern Aleutians and the southern portion of the Alaska Peninsula will take over, and eventually that low is going to pull back up toward Kuskokwim Bay, Etolan Strait, and the lower Yukon Delta Monday into Tuesday. And then behind me, we're going to have a ridge of high pressure over western Canada continue to build north and westward, which is going to allow the Panhandle to dry out and get quite warm with temperatures there, perhaps in the 60s, even some 70s as a result of that situation. But here in the west, IFR conditions Sunday morning along the northwestern coast, Chukchi Sea, Seward Peninsula down in through the southwest, all the way down through Kuskokwim Bay, back towards St. Matthew. During the daytime, we expect the ceilings to lift a bit and improve, but we do have precipitation in the form of some rain showers and areas of light rain along this front. Still IFR areas of the Chukchi Sea, St. Lawrence down to between Nunavik Island and St. Matthew to St. Paul. And then on Monday morning, still rather extensive IFR conditions from western and south side of the Brooks Range down across the west central interior, Norton Sound, lower Yukon in through Nunavik Island west towards St. Matthew and St. Paul. And then on Monday afternoon, we still have this area of moisture, some lower ceilings and light precipitation lingering here along areas of the central Brooks Range down into the central Yukon Valley. Further east, MVFR conditions in the Gulf, but generally VFR conditions are anticipated for the Panhandle, much of the eastern interior as that ridge of high pressure continues to exert its influence to the west and north. Anahtuvik Pass on Sunday will be IFR becoming MVFR. Same thing at Adigan Pass there, IFR to MVFR in the Brooks Range. Lake Clark and Merrill generally holding on to MVFR conditions during the day Sunday. Same thing for Rainy Pass as well as Windy Pass as we go up through the Alaska Range, but there will be some stronger winds and potential for turbulence there across especially areas of the central Alaska Range as we see winds increasing out of the southeast and south. And Isabel Pass, MVFR becoming VFR, and then finally way toward the east toward the Alcan border, east end of the Alaska Range, Mentasta VFR. Tanita Pass, generally VFR conditions are expected, though west south of there, MVFR conditions will prevail in the mountains south of Tanita Pass. And Portage Pass should generally hang on to MVFR conditions extending out into Prince William Sound. And then finally, most of the Panhandle should be VFR, with Chilkoot and White seeing VFR conditions there on Sunday. Freezing levels aloft, most notable with this warm dome of high pressure over Canada, way over here to the far right of your screen. We have freezing levels aloft in excess of 10 and 12,000 feet, a signature of that warm dome of air. Further east, we have the occluded front that's coming into the western part of the state, and ahead of it we see freezing levels aloft as high as 8 and 10,000 feet near the tip of the Alaska Peninsula and southward into the Pacific Ocean. There is a potential for some isolated moderate icing along and behind what's left of that initial occluded front that's pushed inland and in the process of weakening. Generally, though, with higher freezing levels above 12,000 feet here in areas of rain along the Alaska Peninsula, eastern Aleutians, perhaps above 8,000 feet along Prince William Sound, the eastern Kenai, and then as we get back into the colder air, above 4,000 feet, especially around in north of Nunavik Island through the lower Chukchi Sea and Bering Strait. Here's the way the map looks. Big ridge of high pressure out there in Canada, kind of a little bit of a squeeze play, a little bit of a trough or low to the there. Out ahead of it, though, southwest winds upwards of 130 knots on the periphery of that ridge, and then also another broader trough over the Bering Sea, and that's going to create this kind of temperature gradient where the fronts will be at stronger winds aloft 9,000 feet, 50 to 75 knots, the west and northwestern portion of the mainland. And then 3,000 feet, we see a broad belt of winds anywhere from 35 to 55 knots from areas of the peninsula on up through the west side. And as a result, there's the potential for isolated severe turbulence along areas of the northwest coast, western Brooks Range, down through the west central interior. Generally, the surface to 4,000 feet, and then a couple of pockets of moderate turbulence around St. Lawrence and in the western Aleutians, surface to 3,000 feet.
Ahoy, extra cadets! and welcome to the Okeanos Explorer. I'm Debbie, and I'm an ocean explorer. I work for NOAA, which stands for the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. Together with many other people, I work on this ship, and we explore the deep sea. How do we do that? Let's go find out.
Octonauts, let's do this. Yow!
The pressure in the ocean is so great humans can't go there, so we send a special robot. Octocadets, meet Deep Discoverer, our special robot for ocean exploration. And this is Chris. He works with Deep Discoverer. Hi, Chris.
Hey, Debbie.
Can you tell us about what Deep Discoverer does?
Sure. So this is Deep Discover, and today we're going to take Deep Discover up to 4 miles down to the ocean floor so you can see what Deep Discoverer sees.
And how do we do that?
We do that by using these powerful cameras and powerful lights.
That's neat. And what is that?
And this is our manipulator arm, and we use this arm to take biological and geological samples that we store up front in these boxes, and so that we can bring them to the surface so scientists can analyze them.
Wow, isn't that cool, Octocadets? Now that we know more about the special robot that explores the seafloor, let's find out more about the ship. Octocadets, let's do this. Now let's find out what we do with D2's video. Come along. This is the control room. A lot of things about D2 happen in here. Behind me, you see the pilots. They steer D2 on the seafloor. And over here, we have scientists. Hi, Steve and Stacy.
Hi, this is Steve and I'm Stacy and we are marine biologists.
Can you tell us about the work you do here?
We actually look at the videos collected by the robots and we try to identify organisms along with other scientists on the shore.
What are you looking at right now?
We're actually looking at a sea star.
That's so awesome, thank you. Now let's look at how we make maps of the seafloor.
Excellent, Quasi. A good map helps you to get to places you've never been.
We also have a scientist on board who makes maps of the seafloor. Hi, Derek.
Hi, Debbie.
Can you tell us about your work?
Sure. My job on the ship is to make maps of the ocean floor. We do this by sending sound from the bottom of the ship. It echoes off the seafloor and comes back to the ship. And then from that, we can make maps like this. So this is what it would look like if you were able to drain the water out of the ocean and actually see what the landscape looked like down there. We use these maps to give the vehicles a place to dive, and they explore further, just like Octonauts do.
Status report, Dashi.
We're right on course, Captain.
So earlier we learned that D2 picks things up from the seafloor with his manipulator arm. Let's find out what we do with those samples. This is the wet lab, and Megan spends a lot of time here. Megan, can you tell us about your work?
I am the sample data manager, so when the ROV comes up, we go out and we collect the samples from the ROV and we bring them in here. And we try to record as much information about them as possible, everything from the details about what they look like to the environment conditions where they were found. How cold was it, for example? Then we come in and we take imagery using this microscope, and we take pictures using this camera as well. And then after we get all the pictures taken and we're ready, we prepare them for shipping to other scientists and museums so more science can be done, such as the squat lobster, this cup coral as well.
And what is that?
This is a piece of coral, or several pieces of coral, that we think might actually be a new species. So we are going to send it out for a comparison to existing species to see if we discovered something new.
Wow, you have a really cool job.
Thank you.
Fascinating. I've read about this, but I've never actually seen it.
An important part of how we explore the ocean is keeping in touch with scientists and Octocadets on shore. Let's go see how we do that. Rosemary, could you tell the Octocadets a little about what that dish does?
Sure. My name is Lieutenant Rosemary Abbott. I'm the operations officer aboard the Okeanos Explorer, and that is our VSAT. It stands for Very Small Aperture Terminal, and inside that satellite dome is a very powerful dish antenna that allows us to communicate with shore and share video in real time. The technology is called telepresence.
Wow, that is so interesting. Thank you, Rosemary. Now I'm getting really hungry. Let's go to the kitchen and talk about food. This is the ship's kitchen, also known as the galley. And this is Michael. Hi, Michael.
Hi, Debbie.
Michael is the chief steward on this ship, and he keeps 49 people fed for 3 weeks at a time. Michael, how do you do that?
With a lot of care and with the help of 3 crew members. I have myself, the chief steward, a chief cook, and a second cook. And we just do it with a lot of love and care and make sure that everybody's happy and well fed. We use up to 150 dozen eggs per trip, up to 100 gallons of milk, a lot of veggies and fruits, a lot of snacks. Everybody's very pleased with what we usually put out. We also make sure that we do it in a loving way, in a sanitary way, in a safe way that keeps everybody from getting any tummy aches.
I'm about to enter the ship's bridge. It's like the Octopod's headquarters.
Octonauts to the HQ.
Ahoy, Captain.
Ahoy, Debbie.
Hi, Eric.
Hello.
Octocadets, meet Eric Johnson, the commander of the ship. Eric, can you tell us about what you do up here?
Absolutely. Hello, Octocadets. My name's Eric Johnson. I'm a NOAA Corps officer, and I'm the captain of the Okeanos Explorer. Welcome to my office. This is where we drive the ship. This is where we control the operations. We run the propellers that are underneath us in the back to the wheel up here at the front, which is where we steer. It's a pretty cool job. It's very exciting, and it's pretty beautiful around here as well.
So, Octocadets, now you know a little bit about the ship and how we explore the deep sea. I hope you enjoyed our time together. I'll see you next time.
Debbie, safety first.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back to the marine weather segment of our show, starting with the sea ice edge. We do have planias opening up along the northwestern Arctic coast there, especially off of Wainwright and Point Lay. As we go further south through the lower Chukchi Sea and then the Bering Strait, more in the way of water opening up and melting occurring as well. We have a strong southerly flow associated with an occluded front that is pushing inland into the southwest coast and along the western portion of the Seward Peninsula. And as we would expect with the winds of 30 to 35 knots from the south, the ice would retreat northward, and also just the seasonal melting that's occurring now at this point. And looking at what we have for marine forecast here for the inner channels of the Panhandle, generally north-northwest winds around 10 knots, waves 2, maybe 3 feet tops from Lynn Canal down through, as we go down through Stevens Passage and into Dixon Entrance. Outer coast winds fairly light out of the northwest to north, 10 to 15 knots south of Gustavus, and more variable 5 to 10 knots around and outside of Yakutat Bay. Waves generally running 5-6 feet on Sunday in the nearshore waters within 15 nautical miles. For the inner channels on Monday, with warming temperatures, we're looking for northwest winds 10 knots through the upper middle channels, 20 knots as you get south toward Dixon Entrance, waves 2 to 4 feet. For the outer Gulf Coast, winds generally 15 to 20 knots, with waves running right around 5 feet. For the northwestern Gulf, strongest winds will be near the entrance here of Cook Inlet out of the east at 30 knots, with waves about 8 feet. Further up Cook Inlet there in the north end toward Turnagain Arm, and as well as we get into Prince William Sound, northeast winds 15 knots, waves running a couple of feet. And on Monday, we expect winds to be easterly in Prince William Sound, 10 knots, waves a couple of feet, same thing through Net Arm and Turnagain Arm. But as we go further south, entrance of Cook Inlet, 25 to 30 knot southeasterly winds with waves of 7 to 9 feet. Across Kodiak Island on Sunday, Saturday, winds will generally be out of the east-southeast around 20-25 knots. Along the length of the Alaska Peninsula, look for winds generally out of the southeast at 25 to 30 knots, with waves running 5 to 6 feet on the North Pacific side and 3 to 4 feet on the Bering side. And by Monday, there's going to be this wave of low pressure and frontal system trying to push further northeastward. Look for south to southeast winds around Kodiak Island at 25 to 30 knots. Those winds will tend to turn more southwesterly as we go down the middle and lower end of the peninsula, with the waves running on the order of 6 to 9 feet on the North Pacific side and 5 to 6 feet on the Bering side. Across the Aleutians, eastern Aleutians, winds generally out of the northeast, or northwest rather, at 15 knots, becoming more west to southwest once you get from the central Aleutians back toward Kiska and Shimia. Waves generally running 5 to say 6 feet on the North Pacific side and 3 to 4 feet on the Bering side, a little higher there in the western Aleutians. And then across the Aleutian chain for Monday, winds will generally be out of the northwest to west, 20 to 25 knots. Waves running 7 to 9 feet on the North Pacific side and generally 7 to 8 feet on the Bering side. And along the southwestern coast, winds will be out of the south upwards of 25 to 30 knots. So again, ice still retreating northward and melting off as well. 30-knot winds there within Norton Sound. And then variable winds back toward St. Paul and St. George around 10 knots, with waves in the open waters running generally 5 to 7 feet. And for Monday, look for winds to turn back toward the northeast and north on the backside of a secondary low that's going to lift up across the peninsula and pull back through Kuskokwim Bay and Etolan Strait. So winds will be more northeast and northerly here along the Norton Sound and the lower Yukon Delta, but turning westerly across St. Paul with waves there of 4 feet. Along the Arctic coast and through much of the north, winds are generally going to have a southerly component on Sunday, 20 to 30 knots, especially once you get from Prudhoe Bay through Utqiagvik and then down through the Bering Strait, north side of St. Lawrence, as well as Norton Sound. Look for 30 to 35 knot southerly winds. So again, ice will tend to retreat northward and shift around a bit, but we're also getting quite a bit of melting now with this time of year. And for areas along the Arctic coast, Monday, generally a southerly component to the wind at 20 knots. Winds turn back toward more to the north and northeast as we go down through the lower Chukchi Sea and across Norton Sound, the north side of St. Lawrence, with winds as high as 25 to 30 knots from the Bering Strait to the north side of St. Lawrence. And here is that one low that's going to pull back and develop northward on Monday. And overall, we're going to see the west side of the state a little stormier.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.